Becoming the Queen of Talk TV is a book by Morayo Brown, and we'll be reviewing it today. It's so good to have you here with us.
Thank you, Mary.
Awesome. So when I picked up this book, I didn't quite know what to expect. But I'll tell you that until I finished it, it was hard to put it down. There's something about hearing about people's stories. You get a better understanding of them, of what makes them who they are as well. Going through the chapters is what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
And I'm not going to ignore any part of it, because there is no way you would, if you pick up this book, you realize that every page counts, and that includes the prologue. So I'm usually very interested when it comes to books. Did you write your prologue before the book itself, or did you just start?
I just started. So when I had the idea for the book, it was given by somebody, Dr. Sibling. He saw me and said, "Morayo, you need to write a book." I never given it a thought before then. But then he tried to help me. So what he did was like, you know what, let's put your life in few chapters and let us talk about the stories surrounding those areas. And we tried to do it, but unfortunately, I just wasn't satisfied with it. So I just abandoned it for a while. But then I just felt that, listen, I saw lots of books. I read a few other people's books, and I realized that we're not quite telling our stories. We just kind of summarize life's experiences into lessons. You know, forgetting that we need to actually share the story and let people deduce by themselves what they have learned from your own experiences. So that's why I say, you know what, I have to write this book. And I went back to those chapters. I rewrote them, and then we started breaking them down before I now thought of writing the prologue. So the prologue came actually after the story itself.
Your book is a deeply relatable book, and it's also quite personal.
Yes.
A lot of it is personal. As I mentioned earlier, talking about the prologue, the first line, we all have childhood memories etched in our minds. That line alone gets you thinking of your childhood, because I was like, okay, she's going as far back as her childhood. But then nothing prepared me for what was in the pages of this book. Even talking about the prologue, on page 2, you talk about experiencing childhood without your siblings. Now, anyone who did not read the prologue will probably not understand why it featured so much throughout the book. And you made reference to it, which means that it's an integral part of yourself that you probably still think about, you ponder over, even when you're able to reconnect with your siblings. But that's me getting ahead of myself. But let's get back to the prologue.
No, but interestingly, until I wrote this book, even my brothers didn't have a clue how their absence impacted my life or affected my life. They had no idea. They just thought I adjusted, but it was difficult. You know, it was a hard time, especially when everybody bragged about their siblings. My brother is defending you. People are bullying you at home. You have somebody to help and encourage you or to defend you. I didn't have that. And what was worse, if I was an only child, it would be great. But because I was constantly told that I have brothers, and I'll be told stories about how they were, how that my dad used to discipline them, how tall they were, the schools they attended. And so it was like this fairy tale of brothers. I just never met them, So it really affected me in the way that, it kind of affected my self-esteem, it affected my self-confidence, and it took a while for me to, even when I finally met them, it took a while for me to adjust and accept. Although I was happy to see them, but it took a while for us to reconnect and be real siblings eventually.
This actually gets me thinking of technology. We do not appreciate technology as much as we should, because as at that time when you were growing up, there were no phones, so no way to do the phone calls we take for granted. You do video messaging now. These are things that could have even helped you all bond, despite the fact that they are not in town. I wonder, do you sometimes look at technology today when you're thinking about missing out, having your brothers in your child? Do you sometimes think of technology and say, wow, people don't know how lucky they are?
Interestingly, my kids haven't traveled before, and they met all their cousins online. It was just good to know that even though you're not there physically with them, you can have a relationship with your cousins because you speak to them online. So you're right, technology has really changed things. Back then, they call maybe once every 4 months, or you only hear of stories your dad tells you when he comes back. So you never saw them. So things are definitely different now.
Now, for people who have siblings, they can't relate with the boredom part. When you talked about the boredom, there's a particular term you mentioned still on page 2, I believe. you called it Boredom Island, a journey back to Boredom Island. That was what you were calling home then. And for many children, you're eager to get back home. You don't want to go to school sometimes. But for you, going to school was the highlight of your day. And so it makes one wonder, that boredom, how were you able to cope? You talked about all the things you tried to do, but how were you really able to cope?
Coping was really dependent on my neighbors. My neighbors, the Adeshokons, they were so helpful in giving me the company that I did not have, but they were, I think, about 2 years or 3 years younger than I was, and we went to the same school. So whenever I go back home and the house was locked tight, there was nothing for me to do, I used to go to the house. But because my parents also would teach you don't keep going to people's houses, so I'm always very careful. So I can't be going every day. So I'm always mindful of when I go and when I can't go. But staying home, having to converse with helps that don't understand English properly, or sometimes, we had a houseboy, Mr. Brajon. Brajon couldn't speak a word of English, so, and I was bored. The living room is locked. No, the living room was opened. The staircase that goes upstairs to mommy's room was locked. That the dining table was open. So I only had the dining table and the living room. And the living room TV starts at 4 p.m. So once you're home, you're just sleeping.
Back in the day, another thing about technology.
So you're just there and there was nothing to do. And sometimes my neighbors, after school, their parents take them somewhere. Either they go for after school activities or stuff like that. I couldn't do a lot of after school activities because there was a schedule for me to get home at a certain time so that the driver can go back to the island to pick up my mom from Akwangwong. So there was a lot of things that affected me that caused me to just be alone in the house. And that, again, was another part of my life that really molded my independence and thought, because I was able to think deeply and give me time to myself a lot of times. And that was
now, before we proceed taking the first chapter, I just want us to go back in time to that period. Looking back, do you have any regrets? Some people say when things happen, yes, at that point there was probably bitterness, resentment for certain things that were happening, but then when being older, you look back and you ask yourself, was it really such a bad thing? Are you in that space right now?
No, I don't think so. I think even as a child, as a child, I didn't know what I was missing because I didn't know any better. I didn't even realize how traumatic it was for me as a child. For me, it was like, okay, they're in America, okay, I don't see them, I'm crying, I wish I could see them, but that's it. But it was when I started growing up, when I met them, I then realized the void, the absence actually left in my heart. Because when you're piecing together your life, you realize, why are you not close to people? Why are you not very friendly? Why are you not out, the kind of person that is very outspoken, or you go out to people and hang out? Because I was just by myself. I was comfortable in my being alone. I see how my brothers are very friendly. They hang out, they have friends, they're always in the clubs and doing stuff. I just rather stay put, because that was what molded us. When I was thinking back to what led to me being like this, because I'm quite different from quite a few of my siblings, and I realized it was because of that experience. So I started acquainting myself with that experience as a child to understand where I am as an adult. I
think the highlight of the prologue for me is where you said, I believe that all the experiences I have garnered are the things that ultimately prepared me for the making of your view. That's on page 4.
Yes.
And it's more or less summarizes all that you've been saying now.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So at this point, we'll head to chapter 1.